We're back with more NBA coverage. In this one, I'll be covering all the Game 5 action of the first round of the 2026 postseason for the National Basketball Association. Of course, at this time, a lot of the series are even up, and a couple of teams are facing elimination situations heading into this particular slate of games. Really, you are playing to survive out there. Some teams are in clinching situations, so they naturally want to take over, get the series done early, and try as best as they can to advance and get out in front of preparation for the next round entirely. As long as we're in this one, though, everyone with a fighting chance is going to try to deploy something out there that can allow them to establish control heading into a next game, if it so happens to be that way, and also establishing a little bit of control heading into their next matchup, just to give themselves a bit of breathing room. On the other end, if these teams had gone through a recent slump, any sort of weakness in the last game, they'd look to correct that as swiftly as possible in this game. Any number of things can happen in a situation like this. And it is where we start with one of the teams actually facing an elimination scenario heading into this. Of course, the Nuggets were down 1-3 to the Timberwolves heading into Game 5. And so, knowing what we came to understand about the injuries they suffered, my inhibition was that, hey, at least the Nuggets, because there's no way they're getting gentlemen swept, there's at least an opportunity for them out there to get a game. At least another game to extend this series, prolong it. Like I said, it's Nikola Jokic. At some point, you would expect him to come through and deliver a performance that could save this team. He's good for at least one of them. The Timberwolves, on the other hand, were going to do as best as possible to try to get him out of rhythm. And granted, with some of what they were doing early, getting out in transition still and forcing some very questionable turnovers, they were able to, at the very least, keep things close in the first quarter. What also stuck out to me is that even when you look at some of the other defenders on this team, the fact that they still had, on at least a possession, Michael Conley Jr. step in and play tremendous defense on Jamal Murray, that said a lot to me. He is by far the weakest defender that the Timberwolves would have on their roster. Of course, he's going to have to play more with the aforementioned injuries to DiVincenzo and Edwards, and still, with substituting him in, you aren't missing much of a step there because of the effort that he's playing with. And that can carry a team a long way. Still, there are moments where effort cannot always mask the flaws within a given team. And it did not help that early in this game, and I mean very early, Jaden McDaniels actually got himself in foul trouble. Yes, he was already at 2 fouls in the first quarter. And so he had to sit down, as by this point the Nuggets were already holding a bit of a lead. It is at this point that things started to ramp up for Denver, especially with some of these other guys stepping up and hitting their shots, namely Cameron Johnson and also Spencer Jones throughout this quarter early in the game. Naturally, they're going to be open shots if you have Jokic being such a dominant presence down low and in the middle of the floor. And compared to how they performed in the last few games, where their offensive rating compared to that of the regular season had tanked immensely, they started to have these players step up and hit timely shots, which by and large began to take a little bit of pressure off. That is the exact way in which the Nuggets were going to accomplish this. Yeah, you could have a big game from Jokic, but at the same time, asking him to take each and every single shot and asking Jamal Murray to take each and every single shot. You've seen elimination games against this specific team over the past few years now where that hasn't worked out because you've tired yourselves out. Having the ability to stretch the floor and have these open shooters convert a lot of makes creates a situation where it benefits everybody out on the court. So they ran with this. They went on a 9-2 run, and they just caught that defense all on a source. Like, there were moments where Tim Hardaway Jr., of all people, on a high screen, he was able to just slip right past as they attempted to double team Jokic. And he cut into the lane for an easy layup, uncontested. And those are just the little things that allowed Denver to space this out early. It's not to say that the Wolves were completely out of it, especially considering that Bones Highland has continued to be a solid presence off the bench. And with him trying to close this out, trying to get a slight measure of revenge against this Nuggets team, he figured he would have a bit of extra motivation on him. But it would be a 29-34 game in Nuggets' favor after the first quarter. And while I did miss watching part of the second quarter live here, when I got back in, one of the main things that stuck out to me was their willingness to put Julius Randle inside the paint and line him up against Spencer Jones. Of course, we know a lot about Julius Randle at this point and how they believe that he operates much better in the post compared to having him run this point forward style of play. So even though there were a couple of occasions where he just put up some wild shit and he did end up missing this ensuing shot that I noted against Jones in the post, at the same time, I'm like, if they're going to keep throwing Spencer Jones at you, I ain't going to lie, I will very much live with Julius Randle taking advantage of that. It is when he, again, gets into tunnel vision that things can get pretty bad. But that's a good display of him trying to use his size to his advantage, and that could really help the Wolves establish a bit more presence in the paint, because they'd been lacking in that. The Nuggets still had a very brief lead here, but they had the control of this game. And so it was all about slowing down that pacing, in a sense. Did not help that the Wolves also sunk themselves just a little bit with some turnovers of their own, as they had a 7-2 run at this time, and they themselves also got into some aggressive defensive lapses. Same thing. While they weren't always looking to it, the fact that Michael Conley Jr. was anywhere near Nikola Jokic in a particular possession, like he was literally smack dab guarding him in the paint for some reason. Like, you allow that shit to happen again, and yeah, Jokic is going to maul over him. I love Michael Conley Jr. He doesn't stand a chance against that. So you have to think a lot smarter there. It'd be Cameron Johnson to go on a 4-point personal run before Nikola Jokic, doing what he does best, took Gobert at the top of the key and cashed in a near buzzer beater to increase the lead to 9 and give them the 60-51 lead at halftime. So already the Nuggets have been of the mindset that they want to control the line of scrimmage in this. They don't want to allow the Wolves to get out in transition and beat them in the ways that they did over the past 3 games, if you will. And if we want to trim that down even further, the last 11 quarters overall, because again, all this stuff for Minnesota started all the way back from the second quarter game 2, when it looked like the Nuggets were just going to run away with it the entire time. How quickly things can change. Now, their backs were against the wall, but they had a 9-point lead at halftime. So it would be very interesting to see if they could retain it. And after we got through the point of them literally putting up a stat line of the lack of high fives that Grant Hill got from the damn Denver mascot in the game, we'd be able to lock back in and see what exactly would go down. It is safe to say that Spencer Jones, the player for Denver who had recently signed a standard NBA contract with what he's done for them this season, especially in relief, because the way I'm seeing it, he would probably be an alternative player or a person sitting directly behind Peyton Watson, who has not been available all series long. And he stepped in this game and provided them with a massive spark off the bench. Like, this dude, as awkward as his three-point shot is, that shit was falling. And he was playing some very good defense. That's why, I guess, with his wingspan in a way, they were still trusting him to face off against Julius Randle in that area of the court. Because he was not relenting much of anything. And when he got those open looks, he was just torching them. Like, he had back-to-back three-pointers in a row that forced the timeout from Minnesota and increased the lead to as much as 15. And then you had a sequence involving both teams just getting very sloppy with a basketball. Ah, man. Goodness gracious. They were just caught too many times in weird spots on the court. And though Minnesota taking advantage of that, they were able to at least make an attempt, if ever so slightly, to dominate the painted area on defense. They still allowed Spencer Jones to cash in another three-pointer before he was done, and then leak out in transition for a wide-open dunk. Like, the Nuggets, although the Timberwolves are still in the battle, they ended up outright winning this entire third quarter, and it wasn't even close. Although Spencer Jones, again, makes this dunk, it's a 19-point lead at this time. They are just trying to run away with this, while Nikola Jokic, on what was a 16-5 run, just continued to locate these players with elite passes down the court, which is typical for a player in his shoes. Just generalizing, commanding the entire offensive flow of the game. And of course, he was able to get his as well. The Wolves just really faltered from their ability to get inside the painted area and force the pressure on this weaker Nuggets defense. It was they themselves who had to rely on back-to-back three-pointers from Ayo Dosunmu and Terrence Shannon Jr. just to bring this game back within 15. Ultimately, though, by the end of the quarter, with another short run after Cameron Johnson himself would also, en route to a stellar game, step all the way back and splash in a three-pointer of his own, the long ball was their friend. And they were just converting on them time and time again. Like, the lead was as large as 22 for Denver. And that is what the quarter ended at, with them holding a 97-75 lead. So far, through three quarters, it looked very good, very optimal for Denver. And they were just 12 minutes away from potentially clinching a Game 6 here and extending the series, avoiding immediate elimination. Then came the non-Jokic minutes, which had typically been good for Denver all season long, much better compared to other previous seasons. It is said that no lead is safe in the NBA, and although the Nuggets would reach 100 points essentially at the 10-minute mark of the fourth quarter, they allowed the Timberwolves to still slowly but surely, even with me not taking my notes because I'm still of the mindset that, hey, this game is over. they've got this in the bag not so fast. They got a little too cute and sloppy. And even though they would eventually substitute Nikola Jokic back in the game, they allowed them to get a full head of steam and conduct a run of their own, really tightening things up on this Denver team, not allowing them to gain much traction. And before you knew it, hell, with Nikola Jokic coming back in and throwing a pass right into the direction of Ayo Dosunmu on a leap, they were able to trim away at this lead. And it ultimately got down to just a 10-point deficit once Naz Reid hit this in what could have become clutch time if it would have ever dipped under there. So for them to be down by as much as 25 in this fourth quarter and still chip away to make this only a 10-point ball game, if they weren't careful, oh boy, this could have gone several different ways. However, the Nuggets turned it around by simplifying the game and just spamming the routine handoffs between at least another ball handler and Nikola Jokic. Spammed it. And they had no way of really stopping it in that moment. It was just too effective. And it really became the separator for them in this game overall, as they were able to maintain their lead, had a 12-3 run at this time to seal it up, and they won this game 125-113 to keep their season alive. Because again, there's no way that a team like this is going to get just completely gentlemen swept. I thought, and I figured as much, I was right, that they had at least one in them. They cleaned it up a lot. And on the Timberwolves' end, to look at them first being the losers in this game, they had control of the rebounds. They shot slightly better from the three-point line, but that paint dominance, the efficiency when it came to them protecting the basketball, it just wasn't there. They actually had 9 more turnovers compared to the Nuggets, and they beat them at their own game, scoring 35 points off of those 25 turnovers. We had several games in the postseason up to this point with teams putting up more than 20, and rarely do you see those teams having success. You can imagine that those numbers decrease with any team putting up 25. They also allowed the Nuggets to be on an even playing field with them in regards to points in the paint, which was not typical of the dynamic there when it came to their last 3 wins in the last 3 games of the series. Of course, the injuries that they have suffered could not be controlled, but in this game, fresh off of dealing with both of them and having to go through a full game without those guys, they struggled to put it all together. Now, Julius Randle in this game still did have 27 points, 9 rebounds, and 6 assists on 8 of 15 shooting with 2 threes, so that's promising. Ayo Dosunmu also had 18 points and the starting position and had 4 assists on 7 of 14 shooting and 3 three-pointers. Not necessarily the damn 43-point ball game, still enough to instill a little fight in this Minnesota team, even when it looked like they were out of it. Bones Highland and also Terrence Shannon Jr., who hadn't logged too many minutes in this series beforehand, each put up 15 points with at least a pair of threes made. The Jaden McDaniels struggle was also just tough, as he also reached 5 fouls in this game. And having those 2 early did kind of set this team back, as they sought him out in ways to keep him in that foul trouble throughout the rest of the game. There was very little margin for error for this Minnesota team, recognizing that, hey, this is their best perimeter defender and the best wing defender that they have by a wide margin compared to anyone else on that team. And once he was taken out of his element, it lightened things up for the Nuggets' entire operation. Naz Reid also had 12 points in this game on 5 of 11 shooting with a pair of threes and 8 rebounds. All in all, they'd have to be very, very not cautionary, but just make sure that they don't mess around in the next game. Because the last thing you want to do is continue to give Denver more life in this, which would certainly be the case with a performance like this. They shot 56.6% from the field as a team. And again, we're able to get advantages in all those things, as Jokic and Murray still had their own kinds of good performances. They didn't have to go completely over the top. You had Nikola Jokic put up 27 points, 12 rebounds, and 16 assists, along with 2 blocks on 9 of 15 shooting with a single three. And that triple-double would be very historical. Not only did it end up saving the Denver season, it also tied him with Russell Westbrook for the most career triple-doubles all time at 221 as of the recording of this video. They're accounting for both regular season and postseason in that equation. And Jokic is in the prime of his career, and he's already tied this. And he's at the center position. Like, this is genuinely something that we have never seen before. And for him to be able to pull that off in a win means a lot to the team in general. Because, sure, you could have a triple-double, and this could come with your season being completely over. That would be a very bittersweet moment. It just has come in so many different ways for Nikola Jokic. Like, it's him just doing what he did in this game. Controlling the pace. Being the focal point of that offense. Not even necessarily having to worry so much about scoring. As even with him averaging a 27-point triple-double in the regular season, you still wouldn't go out and say that that's his strongest quality as a player, and he can do it at an extremely high level. It's insane. Russell Westbrook and guys like Oscar Robertson as well did it in completely different fashions. But all the while, they were able to make that history over a good number of years. And you're telling me in 2026, all Nikola Jokic needs is another triple-double to set the all-time record. Whenever that does happen, it's going to be something truly special. And it would be well-deserved at that point. Jamal Murray also had 24 points and 7 rebounds on 9 of 23 shooting. And Spencer Jones, in the start, had 20 points, only 3 steals, 3 blocks, and 3 rebounds on 7 of 9 shooting with 4 threes. Hyper efficient. And he also had that aforementioned 11-point third quarter as well. It's really high. And by that point, there wasn't much the Timberwolves could do to knock them out of the zone. Cameron Johnson also had 18 points and 6 rebounds with 5 assists and 3 steals of his own on 8 of 13 shooting. So all these players, even with the odds being stacked against them, tightened up and bunkered down for a massive win in Game 5. Now the challenge would be to see if they could pull it off at least one more time. That's how you'd have to approach a potential comeback, taking it a single game at a time and moving on from there. Then we move next into the Tuesday action to start out with the 76ers and the Celtics. Now, admittedly for this, doing my work on another medium, I was not able to catch at least a good amount of The first half of this game, what I will say is that as I was tracking it through Fox Sports on play-by-play, the 76ers, despite being down 1-3 themselves and not having the best record all time when it comes to those situations, they were keeping this game relatively close. Of course, the Celtics were still retaining a pretty solid lead by this point, and while they did, after Jason Tatum, make an early three-pointer at around the 7-minute mark to increase the lead to 42-31 and an 11-point margin, it's not like the Celtics were able to completely run away with the entire game, especially compared to that Game 4. And I'm sure that was the message that Nick Nurse had entering this game. Like, you could not allow the Celtics to scatter up and down the floor and just splash threes in your face the way that they did in the last game to a record-setting tune in their franchise's history. You could not allow something like that again. This was a winner-go-home situation. You had to play with maximum effort on both sides of the ball and keep this thing close for as long as you possibly could. If you wanted to deliver a knockout punch later, fine, by all means. You had to stay the course early and often. That was one of the only ways you were going to beat this Celtics team. When we got to the end of the first half, they were down by just 7 points. So the opportunities were still there for them to make things happen. Now, at this point of time, when I came back in, it had stated that the Celtics themselves went on a 17-5 run around this time. So that was, the 76ers went on a 17-5 run at this time, just to get back to that point. So the recipe was there. It was about rounding everything else out, which was a bit of a struggle. Even in the midst of that, this third quarter got briefly sloppy for this 76ers team. They were, over the course of this time, inching much closer to a potential lead as the overall fit with everyone involved. Embiid was getting his shots in, and you also had Paul George stepping up and making timely plays. VJ Edgecombe and Tyrese Maxey were actual factors in this game and were allowed to be. They still had a slew of mistakes, though. They went through a 3-turnover stretch in 3 consecutive possessions, which, giving this team an inch, you can't afford that if you're in the 76ers position. Didn't mean too much, though. You compare this performance to Game 4, where both teams just came alive from the three-point line. Neither team was really shooting the best from 3, as I had noted and as they displayed on a graphic, and then everybody just started to go crazy once again when we hit this 5-minute mark. You'd have Jason Tatum respond, and then Tyrese Maxey had the answer before Peyton Pritchard would extend it out once again. So a smaller flurry there, but the tempo was starting to turn up just a little bit. And the Celtics would go on a quicker run themselves, essentially a 7 spot, to space this thing out just a little bit more. They were trying to maintain control of it as long as possible. And while they did, Quentin Grimes making another timely three-pointer here, and also Tyrese Maxey towards the tail end of the quarter, would not let them give up anything else. This game was a 1-point margin by the end of the third quarter, 86-85. And it's crazy too. Like, I think this Grimes one especially, it's like Yeah, those are good shots. They also just completely froze up Jaylen Brown, which I didn't understand. Like, he's right there, and he just allows Quentin Grimes to shoot it. If the Celtics were going to approach things that way, chances are they were going to drop this game. Like, you can't afford to get lackadaisical there. You have to put out the full display of energy there. You can't afford something like that. Not at all. But I digress. You then reach the fourth quarter. And, man, while you do have to credit the 76ers, who at that point started off the fourth quarter on what was a 20-8 run between the end of the third and the start of the fourth, as you also had, again, Joel Embiid continue to settle in this game. And I guess the rust at that point, with the moves that he was making out on the court, it was all gone. Like, he was torching that Celtics defense. And that is kind of what they were anticipating in regards to bringing Embiid back in the first place. It was nice for them to see him activate that when they absolutely needed it. Now, Sam Hauser on his end would try to respond with, again, at that point, this was a long-standing drought. So this three would come to be much more important than people would imagine at this time. And he delivered for them again. He just, again, will at random go ahead and make a succession of three-pointers in a row for you. He could go the whole game without doing much of anything, and he'll still find a way to assert himself as a key piece into a potential win. That's why he gets the PT. Now, at this point, this game was still within 2. And they kept it close for just a little bit more time. Then, for one reason or another, you could frame this as the 76ers having some solid defense, and that could be fair, because most of these shots were not easy for Philadelphia, or for Boston rather, and that's how they had to make it down the stretch of this game. That effort on that side opened things up for them offensively as they continued to space it out and would go on essentially from the 6-minute mark when they had Quentin Grimes step up for another big time shot here. They eventually went on a 16-3 run as both Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid conducted double-doubles of their own, and Paul George also got a beautiful fadeaway shot over Derek White at this time. The offense was just clicking on all cylinders here. They could not miss, and even if they did, they had the energy needed to go ahead and get their own rebounds, secure them, and continue to keep their foot on the gas pedal against this Celtics team. As with that 16-3 run from the 6-minute mark, they'd close it and win 113-97. Now, as great as that is for the 76ers, who would, with this, make this a 3-2 series, logging another one, and stealing a game on the road, meaning that, oh yeah, this is going to turn into something. With that now happening, man, you can very much look at the Celtics here and question just what the fuck was going on. Even in the midst of all that, there were some open looks, namely one from Derek White on a breakdown that just completely bricked off the rim. And there were a number of shots like that. No matter how you slice it, this Celtics team, with a chance to end the series entirely, not only allow Philadelphia to stay alive, they themselves missed 16 straight field goals in the fourth quarter. After that Neemias Cade alley-oop. Yeah, you heard me right. 16 consecutive field goals did not go for them. Not even remotely close. A lot of their points came from the free throw line. That was the only source of scoring. Just not a recipe for success, to say the least. And that is a situation where everybody takes some form of the onus here. Because you just cannot go through a stretch of play like that and expect to ever win a game. When it matters the most, you just suddenly disappear like this. That is rather revealing. I'm not going to lie. And, you know, if you're a Celtics fan exiting this game, you still have faith that your team can close this out, potentially in Game 6, but there aren't many instances where you'd have a team effectively recover from a situation like that so quickly. Like, you have it in your grasp. You can feel it. This was still a close game up to the fourth quarter. And then they just completely shut down. That is inexplicable in so many ways. In this game for the Celtics, Jaylen Brown had 22 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists on 9 of 23 shooting with a single three, while Jason Tatum had 24 points and 16 rebounds along with 4 assists and 3 steals on 8 of 19 shooting with 4 threes on 12 attempts. So not the best game from either of those two. Of course, it's going to run primarily through those guys, and you'd have a trickle-down effect there. Peyton Pritchard was okay off the bench, but did not do nearly as much damage. And again, they couldn't allow that. 12 points for him and 6 assists, although no turnovers, on 5 of 10 shooting with just a single three also. So they limited those top 3 guys much better compared to Game 4. And that ultimately ended up being the key difference on top of just dominating the fourth quarter. And it's crazy too. Like, even with that in mind, the Celtics dominated the glass offensively, yet still did not have enough consistency down the stretch to win the game. If they would have summoned that, we could be singing a completely different tune today. But alas, it did not occur. Joel Embiid proved that, hey, he belongs in this series. This is why he's back. In 39 minutes, he had 33 points, 8 assists, and 4 rebounds as well on 12 of 23 shooting. He did not make a single three-pointer, and quite frankly, for him to still dominate the game in that way, and did he really have to? Not necessarily. Tyrese Maxey still finished with 25 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 assists, and just 2 turnovers as well, for a series in which they'd been getting away with blitzing him on several occasions, trying to get the ball out of his hands and force errant passes. He was much cleaner about that in this game. He also shot 10 of 18 from the field and made 3 three-pointers. Quentin Grimes had 18 as well, with 4 three-pointers off the bench to lead those guys on the second unit. Paul George had 16 with 4 threes as well, along with 9 rebounds and 7 assists. You haven't seen something like that from Paul George in a long time. And if they can at least, again, they're not going to expect him to come in with the amount of money that they're paying him and put up numbers that he was even 4 seasons ago when it comes to some of his individual performances. As long as he is giving you that steady presence as a wing starter, that's all that you can ask from Paul George at this point when everyone's healthy. VJ Edgecombe as well had 10 points and 7 rebounds along with 3 assists. Just filling in the role that he needed to. Like, he is a dynamic player, but with him as well, there's a low-key maturity to his game. where he doesn't need to command the offense every single night to be effective. He still went out there with lesser touches and made an overall positive impact in this game for this team. And that is going to be an important point moving forward for this squad. If they can consistently have that happen for their players here, like, you'll want everyone to show up and perform. But that selfless nature is what's going to keep them in this series for as long as possible. So that performance right there shows a lot of promise on their end. And it'd be interesting to see how they could capitalize on getting this done. Moving on to the Knicks and the Hawks on Tuesday as well. And again, by this point, the Knicks, it was looking scary for a brief second, but they did win Game 4 in convincing fashion towards the tail end of it. So they were more than motivated heading into this Game 5, even though in this situation, they themselves were on their own home floor. They were more than motivated, as I said, from the last recap, to get this done in home country, in front of those fans, and try to get at least another game to put even more pressure on the Hawks if need be. They did not want to leave Madison Square Garden on this day trailing, because that would be the worst possible result for all parties involved, to say the least. So with this game, the Knicks, once more, though I could say even, they got out to a much better offensive start in this first quarter, they still made it an effort to render the Hawks completely ineffective from outside. Like, I hate to sound like a broken record here, but it was literally the same kind of story, at least in the first quarter of this game. The Hawks were making a few shots, but even when you think about it, the fact that one of these shots is Nickeil Alexander-Walker had to literally drift to his side and make a three, fading away in the corner for one of the only makes the Hawks had in the entire half from deep range. That kind of effort being put in on that shot is already revealing enough. With this being Game 5 now, and you're expecting things to be a bit more routine. You're expecting things to be like clockwork, and having everyone gain a full understanding of what's going on the court. And it just did not happen here. Doesn't mean that the Hawks were completely out of the race yet. This is still, as you get deeper into the first quarter, this was a 1-point ball game and then eventually a 3-point ball game as Jonathan Kuminga got himself a score here. But in the back half of this first quarter, it would end up being all Knicks. I mean, essentially after Jalen Johnson slammed his way into the lane, they got on a 16-7 run, the Knicks did, in between the end of this quarter and the very start of the second. As Karl Anthony Towns, coming off of the triple-double he had in Game 4, continued to steady the pace of this one. And they continued to get great bench production from their guys, whether it be Miles McBride or Mitchell Robinson. Again, coming in, wasting no time, automatically being a monster on the offensive glass and buying them an extra possession to work with. Ultimately, they were up 35-22 at the end of the first. And by then, the Knicks as well, as I noted, the game plan for them, they're trying to control the paint on both sides. They themselves are trying to limit their turnovers. And the Hawks, after a little while, man, they had no answer for it. Not much, at least. Now, they continue to allow the Knicks to get out and run in the second quarter. Even Jose Alvarado was able to come in off the bench and make an instant impact. Of course, the conversation was, hey, maybe your bench isn't as deep if you are putting together lineups that had never played with each other in the regular season. But no, seriously, when they are playing at their A game, the Knicks have shown at times in the season and at times in this postseason run so far that, hey, they do have a team capable of playing championship caliber defense. It's just a matter of rounding it out on a game-to-game basis. And if they can do that, they'd be taken a little more seriously. The Hawks were in a very tough position themselves. They kind of had to. Because once OG Anunoby, being the elite two-way, 3-and-D player he is, he would force yet another crushing turnover on this Atlanta team, and it got them out in transition where Jalen Brunson was able to just skate into the lane and go for an instant layup that forced an early timeout and also brought the lead to 22. So when it got down to it, I was thinking to myself, hey, how are the Hawks going to close out this damn second quarter? Yes, they're already trailing. The score does not look the best for them right now. But as long as they can close it out the right way, similarly to how I had explained it with the Raptors being able to do so in Game 4, if they could capture some of that essence, you could have a more manageable lead to work with. Like I said, being down by 15 if it has to be that way is a lot better, a whole hell of a lot better than trailing by 20 plus points. Through a bit of a grind, the Hawks were able to get there. They trailed by 16 points as the Knicks had a 64-48 lead at halftime. The energy just continued for them as Nickeil Alexander-Walker, despite him having a 10-point third quarter himself, he in that entire Hawks defense, they did tighten up just a little bit, still not enough to really gain much traction. However, because they were still able to, even at points where you'd have a response awaiting for them, there were just turnovers upon turnovers piling up for this Hawks team. And there were times at which, for a couple possessions on end, they couldn't even settle into their sets as a result of the Knicks' defense here. Now, they did try to manage this out. They did bring this game back within 15, and the lead was only slightly increased by the end of the third quarter. The key to a comeback is to win those. And while some adjustments ended up working out for them, again, they didn't really do a whole lot to suggest that they could make enough noise in the fourth quarter with getting that start in the third. Man, oh man, oh man. Goodness gracious. Anything could have happened in the first 5 minutes. I'm asking myself, hey, could they get a run? Could they string together stops? Could they do anything to protect their pursuit of victory in this game? Could they do anything of that kind? And the short answer for that, no. Because you go through the first 5 minutes here, and while they were able to force Mitchell Robinson into an early turnover, while they were able to occasionally get to the free throw line, the Knicks still had the full will of this Hawks team in the palm of their hands as this fourth quarter moved forward. They trimmed the lead down just ever so slightly. But you got to this 8-minute mark, and from there, the Knicks just kept on going on an absolute tear. Like, they, as I stated, just balling out on their own turf and locked up each and every single phase of the game at this point. Even Jalen Brunson was starting to skate right past Dyson Daniels, the matchup that the Hawks would prefer for themselves to keep that defensive intensity up. And at that point, I figured that it was like, it was a wrap. Because you literally get here, you have Jalen Johnson after what would be an 82-98 ball game, making a dunk there. The Knicks proceeded to go on essentially a 12-0 run that extended past the halfway mark of the fourth quarter. By that time, the lead was up to 28 points. It was too far gone for Atlanta. And you could feel it in the air a little bit. How they were just starting to concede after this point. Because once you allow a lead to get to 25 plus, and you only have 6 minutes to work with, I'm sorry, unless you yourselves have Tracy McGrady, you aren't going to find many teams able to pull off a comeback like that. The Hawks just struggled in each and every single one of the facets they would need to make this a game. And in ways where CJ McCollum could save them in games 2 and game 3, the Knicks did a much better job of preventing any of that from happening in game 5 at all. So that the Knicks would win 126-97 in this game, as they just got completely boat raced in the final stretch of that game, and also the very start, something that they did not overcome. Did not help that once more they had a very cold shooting start, and once more they got dominated on the glass entirely. I mean, they shot just 44.6% from the field and 31% from deep. They also made 58.8% of their free throws and only got to the line half of the amount of times that the Knicks did in this game. They also yielded 21 more rebounds to that Knicks defense. Most of the advantage coming on the defensive rebounding side. So essentially, even if they'd miss shots on the offensive end, they could happen, and the possession would just end right then and right there. Got completely fucked up in this game, to say the least. Jalen Johnson had 18 points, 10 rebounds, and 6 assists, along with 2 steals on 7 of 15 shooting. Dyson Daniels had 17 points as well and also made a pair of threes. That did not come to matter a whole hell of a lot, though. Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Onyeka Okongwu each had 16 points, and Jonathan Kuminga had 13. CJ McCollum, after being a villain for that 2-game stretch, he did not make much of an impact. They very much limited his ability to perform. He had 4 turnovers in this game and also had 6 points along with 3 rebounds and a single assist and steal on 3 of 10 shooting. A guy who they had been relying upon for the scoring in cases where other players might have been struggling a little bit was not able to really break loose from the intensity that those New York guys played with. And by that point, that ended up being all she wrote. As for the Knicks, I mean, you look at that and you also understand they shot 57% from the field on 79 field goals. Exceptionally accurate all night long, getting the high percentage looks that they wanted all throughout this game. It was Jalen Brunson going for 39 points and 8 assists, along with 15 of 23 shooting and 3 field goals. And there's been this thing coming out going back a few years where Becky Hammon said, hey, you can't win a championship with Jalen Brunson as your best player because he's too small. You can do what you will with that comment. But you also have a graphic in this game stating that, hey, when it comes to some of the more recognized stats in terms of offense throughout playoff runs and throughout a playoff career all time for Knicks players, Jalen Brunson, in a good number of the 5 stats they showed, was top 3 in each of them. So, again, you can say that about Jalen Brunson, but you can't deny that when he is in the postseason, even going back to his Dallas years alongside Luka Doncic, because he showed it in spurts there, now having a chance to be the leading guy on this team, he has shown that he can, in fact, rise to the occasion and bring this team to victory through his own individual effort. He has proven that. And in a series where he'd been held relatively inefficient from the field, again, much cleaner about that in this one. He also protected the ball incredibly well, and that kind of oozed throughout the team. He himself had just a single turnover to go along with those 8 assists, and that makes a world of difference. Again, going against the Hawks team that thrives off of that exactly. None of that was existent really on either side, and it weakened Atlanta even more. OG Anunoby had 17 points and 10 rebounds on 5 of 8 shooting with a pair of threes, and Karl Anthony Towns also added 16 points along with 14 rebounds and 6 assists on 5 of 7 shooting. Jose Alvarado had 12 off the bench in 12 minutes on 4 of 7 shooting with a pair of threes, and even Jeremy Sochan, which I didn't notice all that much, he came in 3 minutes in this game and actually put up 10 points. Just the ultimate slap in the face. And here I was thinking, oh, hey, Jeremy Sochan's not going to touch the floor in this series. So he automatically comes in and puts together one of his better stretches as a shooter point blank, period. That's insane to think about. I'm not going to lie. But hey, Atlanta, of course, it wasn't over for them. They had an opportunity to go back home for Game 6 now. Everything was going to be on the line, and we were most certainly going to see something intriguing in this game. The jury would still be out on whether or not they could stay alive, but man, they were going to need it. And again, playing much better early in the game, not allowing to get themselves behind the sticks that quickly, could end up impacting the entire thing. Keep in mind, this is a regular season series that had been close most of the way through. In the Hawks, when these games have been this close in this series, they've usually come out on top. That's what happened in Game 2. That's what happened in Game 3. We haven't gotten nearly any of that in the last 2. That could show promise for the Knicks, and that could put them on a really interesting path moving forward in this series. The Hawks are going to have to find a way to match that, or else they'd be in tremendous danger heading into Game 6. All right. Moving on to the Trailblazers and Spurs, also on Tuesday. As I noted, they did not waste a single second getting out against this Blazers team, running the floor, establishing their superiority over them completely and running away with this game entirely. Like, no bullshit. They already started this out with a 17-4 run. In the first quarter of the game, just coming out against them, getting any single shot they wanted, and hitting them at an elite rate. And while it did start to slow down a little bit, especially with Deni Avdia on this play later in the quarter, just having Wembanyama be on the other side of the court, he sprinted with an absolute sense of urgency into the lane to take advantage of that. It was one of the few times that Portland could really get 2 feet inside the paint and make an impact. Like, as other moments, it was Wembanyama there blocking the shit out of Toumani Camara. That would happen multiple times in this game. Or it would be him making it difficult on another shooter to make it. That is typically how this works with the way they play their defense. Occasionally, the Blazers were able to hit a few three-pointers out there. Scoot Henderson himself, for example, would get one, but they were hard to come by, and that had been the story for them in this series. Outside of that fourth quarter in Game 2, with Wembanyama being out, they still were struggling to, again, drive into the lane, which is natural. They knew that this was going to be the game plan. They had to make their three-point shots, and they could not. Even when we got later into the quarter, it was Matisse Thybulle and Jeremy Grant out there. Both of them have had their own careers, especially in Philadelphia and Denver, Detroit, as well for Grant, where they've been elite three-point shooters. Of course, we don't really talk about Jeremy Grant's 76ers years. Do we really want to do that? I'm not sure. They were going to be their best bet with them being on the floor, and they also just struggled mightily to hit them in this first quarter. So although this is a 36-24 ball game by the end of it, the Blazers were still far behind the 8 ball if they could not at some point find a way to string together quality shots from the outside. The looks were there in a way at times, and they just were never able to punish the Spurs for it. Now, of course, you can attest how switchable all of these defenders are, and the fact that rotations were mostly executed well, to where these players didn't have room to really settle into much of anything. That much could be true. Still, though, if they're there, that's all that you're being given. At some point, you have got to take advantage of them. They have so many weapons on their roster. If it wasn't Dylan Harper himself getting up for multiple dunks in this quarter, it was Victor Wembanyama doing the same thing. It was Keldon Johnson using his physicality in the post to his advantage and doing the same thing. And ultimately, this game got up to a 26-point lead after Victor Wembanyama trying his best to secure a rebound after a shot he thought he was going to miss. He straight up greened the three, swished right through the net, and the Blazers instantly called a timeout. So a 54-28 ball game before the halfway mark of the second quarter. This was looking like an absolute lost cause for Portland. And in ways, although they would get a brief semblance of life once Shaedon Sharpe and Donovan Clingan were able to make their shots here from the painted area, they still extended this out by the end of the first half to a 20-point lead. They were up 65-45 at this time, with no signs of really slowing down. And just think about this for a second. Because, even the shots that looked to be somewhat fine for Portland saw them have to go through a tremendous amount of work just to get it in the first place. And I mean a tremendous amount of work, because take this into account. In the first half of this game, the Blazers shot just 35% from the field, while San Antonio shot one of the highest marks they have ever shot in a half at 67%. Whether it be this season, whether it be in their playoff history, the highest, tied for the highest in a half. So when I say that they were getting any shot they wanted, you know, I mean that. They didn't have to deal all that much in that sense. And after that point, and I'm like, there's no way the Spurs are going to give this up. Now, again, yes, no lead is safe. The Spurs had the energy it would take to close out a team effectively compared to some of the others in this Game 5 scenario who had themselves a lead. They played with that mindset through and through. Man, I did not end up taking notes for most of the rest of the game. Yet still, through all of that, staring down a barrel, feeling in a sense that their season could have very well been over, the Blazers found life late with CD Zizoko skying in for an and-one dunk past Victor Wembanyama, with their effort on the defensive end starting to ramp up, and with their shots starting to fall. It happened very gradually into the late stretch of this game. But before you look back up, they had themselves an 11-2 run, and they had Sissoko cut the lead down to 9. Now, with that being said, the Spurs, with Devin Vassell trying to get hot again, they took it right back away from them. And yet still, this is a 10-point ball game with 6 minutes left into the game, with their season on the line, considering they were down by as much as 28. Now they were trying to be the team who could come back from such a large deficit. It was unfortunate that they'd already given that up to the Spurs in back-to-back ball games. Why not return the favor and crash the party as they're at home for this game? De'Aaron Fox had other words for that. Similarly to how he performed late in Game 3, how he especially performed in the fourth quarter of Game 4 on the comeback attempt there to then blow them out of the water. You can essentially say that this nigga is Batman. And I wouldn't bat an eye at that. He is Batman. Because what he do when he comes right back into the ballgame? He does nothing but speed up the pace of that offense and just control most of the rest of this game through his own individual ability to create shots as a ball handler. Like, he's just on several possessions here, walking these defenders down, taking and making some very much needed shooting at the time. And when they absolutely had to have someone step up, rather than taking a chance on their young guys, which they could, they relied on a bit of an established veteran here and a recognized closer in this league in De'Aaron Fox, and he got the job done. Just being smooth with his movement all over the court. Getting to the lane, spacing out for three-point shots, and killing them with the lefty mid-range look. Over and over and over again. And at a point, there was very little that the Blazers could do. Like, it was still somewhat fair game. The Spurs were just too strong, too dominant throughout this. And De'Aaron Fox himself, after another layup came to form, this would result in a 13-point fourth quarter for him, as the Spurs closed it out, overcame that brief comeback attempt from Portland, and won it 114-95 to win this series in a 4-1 gentleman's sweep. I mean, I guess in a way, this is what some people were expecting to happen when the Spurs were at full strength. I guess you could argue maybe if Wembanyama doesn't get that brutal concussion in Game 2, they do end this much earlier. Still, what a way to do it. And again, even with the Blazers not being as strong of an opponent, the different ways in which they beat this team throughout this series are just a testament to how much skill this roster has up and down the pike. Just completely ran away with this one. Let them come back into it for a little bit. And by that point, once again, they flipped the switch at the right moment, with Mitch Johnson being smart about calling those timeouts as well, which may not get enough credit. You know, there's a very real possibility that if he just allows that game to continue to play on, the Blazers could have very well made a lot more noise here. And it never got to that point. Even when you take that brief run from the Blazers on paper into account, the Spurs still shot 54.7% from the field by the end of this game and 40% from deep. When you are on that kind of a heater efficiency-wise, you're not going to end up dropping too many games in that scenario. And credit to them, they did not. De'Aaron Fox, with that fourth quarter, would eventually get to 21 points and 9 assists on 8 of 14 shooting with a pair of threes. It was Julian Champagnie as well, who had 19 points, 7 rebounds, and 3 assists on 6 of 9 shooting. Dylan Harper and Victor Wembanyama each had 17 points with at least a three-pointer made. And Wembanyama also had 14 rebounds, 3 assists, and 6 blocks, making him the first player in the playoffs with back-to-back 10-plus rebound and 6-block games since Hakeem Olajuwon in 1997. The stuff that is already being done by this kid is crazy. He's still only 22 years old, and you're already having a stretch of dominance like that, putting you up there with Hakeem. The dream. That's crazy, to say the least. What much can you do about it? And it still got even worse. Like, later in that game, you just have him send a fucking Deni Avdija shot off the top of the backboard and deep into the fucking stands. Just slapping it out of the air as he's trying to put up a last-second bucket. To the point where even his father, Felix, who was in the stands watching this, had to make a fucking stink face. Because it's like, damn. That's my son doing this to these little ass niggas out here, man. I can't blame him for that. You can't possibly imagine how proud he may be in his very spot right now. Stephon Castle also had 15 points and 5 assists on 6 of 11 shooting with 2 threes. And with the Spurs here, they will advance. They'll host the next series and have home court advantage, being the 2 seed and the highest seed remaining. Outside of OKC, obviously, who clinched in an earlier game. One less against the Suns, of course. Both of those teams are, again, incredibly young, and Spurs themselves, in a way, might be ahead of the curve, according to some people. They're playing like they're ready. And they have the talent, it seems, to get there. The fact as well that even against the weaker opponent, and sure, they will most certainly be tested as they face off against stronger competition in the next round, depending on who gets out of it. Man, no matter what, whoever they have to face off against is going to have a whole hell of a lot to deal with. Keep in mind that with Wembanyama specifically missing a single game and the rest of Game 2, when defenders try to shoot against him, the numbers state that he held them to 8 of 42 shooting. The equalizer, the eraser himself. 8 of 42 shooting. That percentage is not going to translate well if an entire team is shooting that. And here you have this man, in the rare occurrence that they do try to actually test him, instead of running away from him, he's still altering the shot trajectory like that. There isn't much that you can do about this. And that could be an issue depending on who comes out, especially if they are a team that's going to be focused on trying to drive to the basket. Because, well, what the fuck? You still have good defense from all these other wings out here. And Carter Bryant, for example, who'd been a massive staple in some of the earlier games, didn't even have to play more than a single minute in this one. And you can best believe that they're going to activate his defense in games to come. Of course, the pairing of guards that they have on this team have spoken more than enough about just what they're capable of in postseason play. It's like everywhere you turn, you are not really finding a weak link at all. And the most important thing you can do in the playoffs is to mitigate your weaknesses as a team. They're going to happen. And the Spurs' weakness happens to be three-point shooting. If you're hitting them at a fair amount like this, and you are still able to have a dominant showing over each and every single other aspect of the game, you still give yourself a good chance to win if you're San Antonio. With this win, they'd win their first playoff series since 2017 as well. It's a great time down there for San Antonio. As for Portland, they did put forth a valiant effort towards the end of the game. It did not end up being enough. Danny Avdia shot 7 of 15 from the field and had 22 points along with 3 rebounds and 3 assists. Having more turnovers in this game as they once again forced him to be more of a downhill passer and trap him with some great deflections on the outside. C.D. Zizelko and Robert Williams III each had 11 off the bench, and Jeremy Grant had 12, while all of the other starters in the game struggled. Even when you look at Drew Holiday, who did have 8 points and 7 assists, but shot 3 of 14 from the field. Tamani Kamara as well, 7 points, but shot 2 of 10 from the field, again including one of the earlier block shots he had dealing with Wembanyama in that sequence. Man, it's like, I think for this Portland team, as I've been echoing, like, this is a team, even with them losing a series like this, they are still very much on the rise. And when you look at what Deni Avdija was able to do this season as a most improved player candidate, when you look at guys like Donovan Clingan really stepping up and finding their roles on this team, or at least starting to do so, they have a roster that can truly improve heading into next season. You consider that they got off to a year like this as well, with a lot of the injuries in place. Having Jeremy Grant miss some time, having Scoot Henderson obviously miss majority of the season, and still having Damian Lillard out for the entire season. They have the recipe, they have the foundation laid in place to capitalize on a boost of a year, considering where they were at and what has just recently happened with one of the people implicated in the entire gambling thing. That took place that obviously forced Chauncey Billups to step down in the first place. Like, they show a lot of promise. The next thing for them is about consistency. And you look at, as I'd already mentioned, with, some of the displays that Shaedon Sharpe and even Donovan Clingan had, the ways in which in the regular season they dropped some of these late games as a result of that inexperience being in those high pressure situations. Those are things that with another year can potentially be improved upon. And it's going to take that work on the consistency for this team to truly become elite and even more well respected down the line. Also, having Damian Lillard come back and play could change a lot. It could take away some minutes from these young guys, but it could also allow them truly to learn what it means to approach the game the right way and stay true to the process of the entire thing. I think that it would prove especially important for a guy like Scoot Henderson, considering all of the things that took place around his draft selection, with the rumors about Damian Lillard not wanting to be the backup point guard and not wanting to have to string Scoot Henderson along and everything like that. And then he eventually got traded in that offseason. That was a bit of an awkward relationship for a while. And now Lillard being back there has, in a way, a chance to correct that. That can happen for several different players on this team. But with this year, having the success that they did to outright secure the 7th seed, that's got to be feel pretty great for the Trailblazers fans out there. It's a tough exit to a really good Spurs team, but they're more than satisfied with this right now. It's just about taking that next step forward as a team. And it starts if they're actually going to express faith in the man who helped them reach this point for the majority of the season. Because I'll be brief about this point, but the fact that I came across something, and I don't know how much merit is in this because, I just saw this earlier this morning, haven't had a chance to look into it. The fact that there is a report surfacing saying that the conversations surrounding a potential coaching hire of Tiago Splitter are very just, not gonna lie, horrible right now. And the fact that the treatment of Splitter is apparently one of the more vicious displays that this insider has seen of an owner who, again, going back to a report in the offseason last year, they do have new ownership with Tom Dundon now taking over for them. He's also the owner of the Carolina Hurricanes. So, now this guy is coming in, and typically in this situation, the new regime doesn't always have to be as committal to pieces from an older one. Don't have to be. Splitter, of course, was the interim head coach this season, and was a part of the previous ownership as well when he originally got there as an assistant. How fucking, and again, he wants to be cheap about it, this report said as well. How fucking stupid can you be? Did you not witness firsthand what the hell Thiago Splitter was doing for this team this season? Just because you want to protect your fucking funds and keep the expenses down, you are willing to sacrifice a season like that of Thiago Splitter and a chance for them to potentially build on it, gather more of a dynamic between him and the players, and ultimately rejuvenate the entire culture in that organization with a full season of work. You are willing to undo all of that just for a cheaper coaching option? What the fuck is wrong with you? And I'm being dead serious. Like, that just can't be real. And I am hoping that this motherfucker comes around to his senses. Because if you put that in jeopardy just to pay less money for a coach, that it just would not make any sense to me. And sure, this is one season from Splitter. Oh, this could be a one-year wonder. Give him a fucking chance. The fuck? As I've already said, and I'm going to remain on this, he deserves to have the interim label taken off. And if it costs you a little more money, then fuck it. It costs you a little more money. Make the fucking deal. If you were a smart man, you would have them, of course, it's probably going to take a little bit of time to actually get the exit interviews going for the regular season and things like that, and get other stuff hashed out before off-season plans start to kick in. If you were a smart man, once all that gets done, you would have Thiago Splitter become the full-time head coach this month. This is the first day of May when I'm recording this. You would have him become the head coach this very month. Full-time. Instead of fucking around. Because there is a chance that if you do hire a new coach, you bring him in, and he doesn't even perform nearly as well as Splitter did. Then Splitter goes on elsewhere and has more success with the next team. You don't possibly want to have, especially with this young of a team you are fielding, you don't want to risk something like that right now. You do not want to play that game. Just pay the motherfucker, man. He has more than earned his right to that. That's not even a question at that point. And here we are playing games just because you don't want to spend that much money. Sometimes it's going to be consistent of that in order to reach the direction you want for the next few years. It's going to take that sometimes. And you have to live with that at some point. It would just be an absolute regret for the entire team if they'd have to just let Splitter walk as a result of that stupid ass shit. No. That cannot be the way in which this wraps up. Once they get that resolved, and they better get that resolved, like he needs to be the head coach of that team. Everything else should follow suit for the organization. It's not a good sign, though, if that is already a report coming out between the coaching staff and ownership. Does not paint the best of pictures. But I suppose we will see what ends up happening. Moving on to the Magic and the Pistons on Wednesday. And with watching the highlights, this was the only of the games that I actually did not watch. So a bit of a reversal from the Game 3 bullshit. Bit of a reversal there. This one had a bit more offense to it from everything that I saw. And it was a true back and forth battle in every sense of the word. I mean, the fact that both of these teams reached 60 plus points in the first half alone sounds fucking crazy. Even crazier is the fact that, hey, while you had other role players like Tobias Harris, like Desmond Bane, like Anthony Black step up, overall, making the timely shots, getting out, hustling on defense, doing all the necessary things to keep a level playing field and things and give themselves a chance and be within striking distance for most of this game. It's not like either team really pulled away all that much from each other. Seriously. Outside of at least early in this second quarter, where it looked as if the lead got up to as large as 17 for the Pistons before the Magic started to heat it up on offense from all levels of the floor. It was the duel of the number one overall picks. This is just, compared to some of the other games you'd see from this series, this was truly one where they just put the best of their offensive skill sets out for those watching on Prime to see at an elite level. They could not miss. These teams, no matter who was guarding either of them, could not find ways to get them out of their zone. Whether it was Banchero playing downhill or Cade Cunningham playing with his own blend of pace and three-level scoring and facilitating. Like, those guys were truly playing as if they were superstars. And it had been more consistent from Cunningham, putting up the numbers he has in this overall series to this point. Banchero? I don't think anybody saw it coming. And you know what? In a game where they did not have Franz Wagner, he was listed as a... He had an injury heading into Game 5. And his timetable was not determined. They at least ruled him out for this game. So, Banchero, when you look at the context, he was asked to do more. And he more than answered the call. Like, even as this game early in the fourth quarter was a little over a double-digit lead for Detroit, he still pulled everything within his own strength to get them back into this and make this as competitive as possible down the stretch. This was a clutch time game, and it got very close. And I mean close. Towards the tail end. Even with all that being said, on a night where Banchero was nearly unstoppable, a key block from Jalen Duren down low would at least hold him off for just a little bit. And then he still responded with a timely three-point shot. Unfortunately for Orlando, they allowed the Pistons to get a bit more physical with them in the final minute to go on a very short but key 4-0 run, if you would even call a 4-point spurt that. It did just enough to separate the rest of the game. And with it still coming down to Banchero having to take, these shots, he was not able to make this three-pointer, although it was a 7-point ball game anyways. And so at that point, despite a truly great effort on both sides, it would be the Pistons staring down a barrel. They were down 1-3 at this point in a surprising fashion, being a 1 seed. They would still win this game 116-109. They controlled the glass, putting up 49 rebounds compared to the Magic's 33. And they also had 12 more points in the paint. Turnovers were relatively even. And that was a bit of a key as well, considering how lopsided the turnover disparity has been, regardless of the winner or loser in each of the first 4 ball games up to this point. Making sure that, literally when you look at this, they finished with the same amount of field goal attempts. So we're getting the same amount of bites at the apple. And it's just about us doing way more with the ball in our hands than you. Outpacing you from the offensive standpoint. It's a little bit different than what the Pistons typically want to do. But when you have players going to work like this, it's not hard to see why it came down to this. The turnovers are still fairly high for both players, but obviously the highlight in multiple facets is the fact that Paolo Banchero and Cade Cunningham had 45 points each, while Banchero added 9 rebounds and 7 assists on a near triple-double, and Cunningham added 4 rebounds and 5 assists along with a steal. Both of them shot efficiently. Cunningham was 13-23 from the field and made 5 3-pointers on 8 attempts, while Banchero went 17-31 from the field and had 6 3-pointers made on 11 attempts. Although he did miss 7 free throws at the line. You can nitpick and say, oh, hey, if you would have made all 7 of those, this would have been a tied ball game. This could have went in overtime. It's not always how it works. It was a good enough performance to keep the Magic afloat for enough to still attempt to inflict damage in this game. At least attempt to. Man. You just can't rave enough about a game like this. To the point where they mentioned that this was the first instance of number 1 overall picks going for 40 in a game. Playoffs, probably playoffs in that sense, since the 2000 NBA Finals when both Allen Iverson and Shaq did it. It's also the first time that players would go for 45-plus points in a playoff game against each other since the 2020 first round game between the Jazz and the Nuggets, when Donovan Mitchell and Jamal Murray, establishing themselves, especially Jamal Murray, as a playoff killer, went for 50-plus points each in that game in the bubble. So just an elite display of scoring all over the board, and they were really the leaders of their basketball teams, respectively. Still at this point, the Magic, you still had Desmond Bane put up 18 points on 6 of 15 shooting 4 threes, and you had Anthony Black, also off the bench, put up 19 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 steals, along with 3 assists on 7 of 12 shooting with 4 threes. They were a little undermanned. As Jamal Mosley said, the job is not done, and so looking into Game 6, which will be on later, if I'm not mistaken, you want to come out and execute much better. You can't always make the excuse that, hey, we don't have this player and this player. No, you still have to go out there and play to the best of your ability, which they may have done as far as this game is concerned. It's just about doing enough to win. Rarely do teams come back from down 1-3, although it is possible. And if it does happen for any team facing this deficit now heading into tonight, it'd be at least it'd be one of very few instances for it to occur. Man, that could be very interesting. As for the Pistons, in terms of other help, if you will, Tobias Harris, of course, had 23 points and 8 rebounds on 9 of 18 shooting. Jalen Duren and Duncan Robinson also had 12 points each, and Amen Thompson had a very weird, non-traditional game here. He, again, is an offensive liability in ways for this team, but similar to his twin brother, Amen Thompson, they are too valuable defensively to not play. And in a game where he goes for 6 points, but 15 rebounds, 6 assists, and 5 steals, and 2 blocks, stuffing the stat sheet in several different ways outside of scoring, he's too valuable on that side of the ball. And that ability for him is too great to where, as long as the offense is not hurting you, he has to be out on the court. Now, they struggled with balancing those rotations out over the past few games because of just how terrible the offense was for Thompson in the inability to make shots. Well, in this game, they needed that kind of effort for him to at least stop the ball on occasion, with the fact that your superstars are going for 45 points against each other, trying to bust the other team's ass. You needed that kind of player in this game who could at least force the action at some point. And those steals and those blocks in a 7-point ball game, even with, again, teams having even cracks at scoring here, meant everything for them. So he had to be out there and play 36 minutes in this game, despite a lower scoring output. Still, though, the Pistons have been in the spot the entire time, because just to take you into the mindset of where they are at right now, yes, you are going to eventually, if you do win tonight, you got to go on the road and get it done in Orlando. You potentially have a game 7 on your hands back at home. So that is a good look, honestly, if you are Detroit. The thing is, even with Cade Cunningham putting up 45 points, as great as it is, as great of a player as he is, it just reinforces the notion that they need somebody else at some point to consistently step up out of Tobias Harris. And it just has not consistently happened. The fact that he is literally having to put on a historical record-setting performance. In fact, the 45 points were a playoff career high for Paolo Banchero, and they were also a franchise record for Cade Cunningham. It is taking that for you to save your season. And still, you have question marks everywhere else on who is going to become that third option. If Cade Cunningham is consistently playing that good, then maybe you don't need it. At the same time, the Magic, seeing what they saw, it's inevitable that they are going to try to get the ball out of Cade Cunningham's hands early and often in this game. And then what are you going to do? Tobias Harris does average around 20-7 for this series, which is pretty crazy, given his consistency is just a scorer, and it typically won't get talked about. He's not like he's an elite player. He just goes out there, he just gets the job done. This man, Cade Cunningham, after this game is averaging 32.6 points per game in this series, and only 5.8 rebounds and 7 assists. On also 6.6 turnovers per. The terrible assist to turnover ratio there. They're going to keep that intensity up. They're going to make sure that someone else steps up in this next game and maybe in a game 7. So we are still at a point where it is going to take another lethal game from a third scoring option to get the job done. And you already staved it off one time. You are able to recover now. It's going to take somebody. You have literally no margin for error. If you lose one more game, you are out of the playoffs. And I'm sure JB Bickerstaff is carrying that same message along. There are no more excuses moving forward. You've gotten yourselves back into the fight, and you need each and every single player out there to make an impact. Now, again, if they're not scoring, yes, by all means, you got to do it in other ways to play, because it does take that too. You just have to find a way to take some of the burden off of Cade Cunningham, because you're going to need him, and you know you're going to need him, especially in clutch time. And look what happened in game 4, where you overworked him and he sputtered because of how they crowded the painted area in the fourth quarter. You're not telling me that if it gets down to a situation like that, the Magic wouldn't think twice about deploying that again? Of course they would. Go for incorporating that defensive formation in their play, in that context, without hesitation. So they have to genuinely be careful about that, or it is not going to bode well for them. Should be a very interesting Game 6, though, considering that effort from those players. I do believe that. It's just like, you need something else, man. You really do. Moving on to the Raptors and Cavs on Wednesday. This had a chance to be extremely interesting, considering the toll that was taken on both sides after Toronto had to grind it out and win. No problem with that whatsoever from the fan perspective and from my own end, as I already discussed in that recap. I already made my case for it there. They were going to have to find a way to replicate that again heading into this game. And of course, with them also, dealing with that stagnation on the offensive end, both sides going through such a physical game, you wouldn't typically anticipate that this would be so markedly improved from one half to the other. Well, although I was not able to watch the first half live, dealing with other business, when I look at this while tracking it, and I see that this is a 74-67 game at halftime in favor of the Raptors, I'm like, whoa. Now, there's the game that'll get all the casual fans ramped up and motivated to keep watching. That's exactly what those guys have been waiting for and they'd been missing. Especially when you juxtapose that with Game 4. I mean, both teams were incredibly accurate. And if you're the Cavs in that spot, honestly, that is something you needed as a team. With the way that you'd been struggling in Toronto from an efficiency standpoint, from a ball security standpoint, all over. They just did not come to play. And they allowed the Raptors to truly settle in to that caliber of lockdown defense. They had no answer for it in time. So to get out to a start like that was impressive for Cleveland. And yet they were still losing, and the Raptors, again, a stronger defensive team by nature, still had the edge here. I talked that much about Jacoby Walter last game and his overall effort on both sides of the ball, despite going scoreless. Well, he was 6 of 9 from the field and had 17 points to lead the Raptors at halftime. And we still question where Brandon Ingram was at. With all that success that Toronto had in the first half, this man still only had a single point. So it's just like, I really am struggling to figure out what the hell is going on with this man in the series. Like, that has been a consistent just red flag for Toronto. And you brought him in there to be a pretty good isolation scorer who could create his own shot and not have to be so reliant on Scotty Barnes to produce those looks. That's what the entire game plan was. And he has just not been efficient all series long. So that's incredibly unfortunate. But at the very least, you're holding this now. It is kind of revealing that defense, again, would slip like this. Maybe it is a semblance of, the Cavs just playing a bit better at home overall. And if that kind of momentum could carry over for Cleveland heading into the later quarters, because of the identity that the Raptors want to have as a team, it may not end up going that well. The main key for them on top of this is that, hey, the defense was faltering, but the shots were falling at a very elite level, as I already stated, with the efficiency. So this made for a very interesting second half. And even still, I missed majority of it, but you saw this game kept relatively close throughout the entire time. And at the specific point that I got in, with around 3 minutes or so left, you had the Raptors eventually extend it up to an 8-point lead once Sandro Mamukelashvili made a three-pointer to increase the lead to 8. However, it would be Evan Mobley and Donovan Mitchell locking in together late to go on a 5-0 personal run to make this a 3-point game at the end of the quarter. And the no-look dom that Donovan Mitchell had to Evan Mobley on that pass, he was just so free and wide open in the lane. Nobody was within a good amount of feet near him. And again, just an elite pass from far back near the half-court line as Evan Mobley slammed it in and converted on that. The Raptors, even with them having the lead, were also benefiting heavily on the fast break opportunities, which is another way in how they want to perform as a team. They had a 22-6 advantage in fast break points heading into the fourth quarter. So the important thing for the Cavs was to, again, protect the ball in ways that they didn't on that road trip to Toronto. Not only were they able to, but in time, they actually, throughout the quarter, were able to take some pressure off of Donovan Mitchell and James Harden. You look at them again, and even I am guilty of saying that literally in the last recap about how you're expecting both of those guys to be closers. Well, if those guys aren't on the court and you're having your other role players and step up tremendously and make these plays, well, it's like you don't even need them to go as nuclear in the late stretch of the game. It could happen, and it could energize them to do so, but having them, sit down and conserve their energy for a little bit of time while those guys go and conduct that damage out there can mean a lot. And they did that because not only did you have Jalen Tyson make this clutch three-point shot to top the game, they started out the fourth quarter. You also had the Cavs, again, between that time, go on an 18-5 run as Dennis Schroder just started to pick up isolation possessions and speed pass mismatches for open layups while being a connoisseur in creating his own shot as well. Like, he was getting deep in his bag of fucking tools. I did not think that he had it in him, but he unloaded that shit at the right time, and he was also putting their guys in elite spots to make shots, which they ended up doing. Before Jamal Shed, with one of the few three-pointers that the Raptors would make, bring this game back within two. And we'll get into that into a second. Because, hey, the Raptors as well, they generally struggle beyond this point to make shots for the rest of the quarter. And granted, it's, not like the Cavs didn't have their own struggles either, but they were still able to, over the course of the rest of the game, by forcing their own turnovers with Max Strus of all people, getting out in space and making plays. Dennis Schroder got himself up to 11 points in the fourth quarter, and also the lead was extended out to as much as 11 before the game was all said and done. Now, granted, the Raptors, they weren't going down without a fight. They did try, but by that time, too much was wasted for them to really do much of anything. And the team could not find a three-point shot lead, eventually allowing the Cavs to win it 125-120 on Wednesday to push it to a Game 6, heading back to Toronto, where they'd struggled, but they're up. They have a little bit of breathing room. They don't have the apprehension that comes with trailing in that spot. And that would have been the worst possible disaster for them, honestly, considering what took place in Game 3 and Game 4 for them playing in Scotiabank and how the Raptors performed there. They were much more efficient in this game overall. They shot 53.1% from from the field goal, generally, and also had 50% shooting from three on 36 attempts. They also shot 50% generally throughout the entire game. So they were able to keep that performance up consistently. And again, even though they were trailing, it was still always a threat they had in their arsenal. They did not really do well on the glass, and granted, if they're hitting shots in an efficient level like that, they didn't have to. They also got mightily outpaced because that fast break advantage extended for Toronto to 26-6 in the game. And if they don't clean that up, they could really be in danger heading into tonight's game. But you will still take a quality win like this. They held the Raptors to just 17 points in the fourth quarter. So, while they aren't as strong of a defensive team, they came around at the right time and got the stops they needed. Hopefully, we come out with a win. Also hurt that the Raptors in the first half were essentially, like, when you look at it that way, 10 of 18 from three-point range. They proceeded to then shoot 5 of 20 in the second half. The team usually, when you look at them in the regular season, they weren't that hot of a team from the outside. But man, they were on a heater in this game, and then they just cooled down when they absolutely needed to make them. And therein lies the quality of this, as I'd already said, rather excitedly and energetically in the last game, or last recap. Styles do in fact make fights. And while the Raptors were up for a majority of this game, while it is good to see them perform well offensively, by nature, that is more so how the Cavs attack playing basketball. They ain't put enough pressure on them in this game to where you're not even necessarily always having to worry about stopping them defensively, but you know that they recognize that, okay, we're going to have to outscore this team because on this night, we don't have enough resistance against them. And so once that switch in mindset happened, that was all the Cavs needed, and they just took it from there. For the numbers in this game for the Raptors, RJ Barrett had 25 points, 12 rebounds, and 5 assists on 9 of 19 shooting. Jacoby Walter had 20 points on 7 of 16 shooting with 6 threes. Jamal Shen had 18 points off the bench and 7 assists on 7 of 15 shooting. Scotty Barnes kind of struggled a little bit, and he had 17 points on 6 of 16 shooting with 11 assists and 8 rebounds. Well, with 3 blocks as well. Jakob Poeltl had 14 points, and Brandon Ingram still finished with 1. Now, I can question that. There is a chance that he got hurt, though. And so I can check that out right now. The fact that there hadn't been a report on that either is interesting. And this game was on Wednesday, and there's still no information about that at all. Like, that's kind of interesting. Okay, so they do have one, and what exactly is the injury? Right heel inflammation, an issue that he has been managing since after the All-Star break. I still, again, when he has been out there, I'd want Brandon Ingram to be along for the ride. At the same time, generally speaking, there were reports that Brandon Ingram was missing time. I genuinely did not have a clue. So maybe I must be looking to the wrong circles or something for this information. This was not something that was really reported on the national level. So I find that pretty ironic. If that is something that Brandon Ingram is dealing with, that could explain some of the struggles, especially with him playing that game, where he is literally planting on his feet and trying to turn around and make shots. That can be a tremendous pain, knowing that you're going to have to do that mainly off your heel. And even when it comes to some of these misses, they're narrow. If he was at full strength, there's a chance that they go in. I don't know. Like, now you're really trying to wrap your head around how to manage the rest of this. You know, like Brandon Ingram, with all that in mind, is still one of the better players on your team. So you'd want to play him. You'd want to get as much production out of him as possible to keep this series alive and force a Game 7. But at the same time, he's been dealing with this since the All-Star break, and you're still going to run him out there and play him? Well, like, if that's the case, if that's what they do tonight, I don't know what they expect from him, quite frankly, if he's already that banged up. I'm just not all that sure. So that could explain it a little bit. And that'll be interesting to monitor. But for the Cavs, James Harden and Evan Mobley would each have 23 points and 9 rebounds on 7 of 13 and 8 of 13 shooting, with at least 3 threes each, respectively. Donovan Mitchell and Dennis Schroder also had 19 points each, including in 21 minutes for Dennis Schroder off the bench, with at least 3 3-pointers each themselves. So they were just lethal all night long, and with the Raptors having to match that energy, even outperform their own expectations just to maintain the lead, it looks good for them in real time. It's not how they operate as a roster. That worked to Cleveland's benefit mightily. Moving on to the Rockets and the Lakers on Wednesday as well. Oh, man. It felt like everything had been lining up for them. They did drop Game 4 in anticlimactic fashion. But hey, they were at home for this game, and they had an opportunity to close still. Of course, they have a person who is typically great in elimination game situations in LeBron James. The Rockets were still without Kevin Durant as far as this game was concerned, dealing with the same injuries and still taking time to sit out. Although, hey, he was there. He was there in person watching the game on the sideline this time. So you can't hold that against him now, I suppose. They were still undermanned in that sense, and they would have a key player return. Everything was looking good for just a bit for this Lakers team, and they did get out to a pretty solid lead after a 9-3 run in this game, with DeAndre Ayton just really going through a mixed bag in this sequence and throughout the entire game. He made good hustle plays, and he was a force on the glass, especially when you take into account what he was able to do. There were just moments where you are questioning what exactly is going on inside that head of his. Because those head scratchers are just always going to be common with him as a player. And you could question that about the team as a whole. They were still, although this game was won by them to this point, they were still getting so sloppy with the basketball. Just turning it over in the dumbest ways imaginable. And having some of these once more just roll right off the body. Marcus Smart would go on to have one that just literally lands off his shoe and leads to an easy fast break opportunity for Houston. That kind of stuff just can't happen. And these are veteran players doing this. Established veteran players who are championship owners. You would understand and believe, have faith in their ability to perform in these situations, and the Rockets defense were still just forcing their hand over and over again. Austin Reeves would come back in this game, though. They'd play him on a minutes restriction, and as I've been saying, the fact that he even had an opportunity to come back at all spelled disaster for this Houston team. Even with them winning Game 4. He got right to work early, getting to the free throw line and making his patented jump shots from deep range to extend the lead out for the Lakers ever so slightly as he would go over those next few minutes on a tear of 8 points at this time. So a fairly hot start for him. Just going right to work. And it kept the Lakers honest there. They, for some reason, and this was just pissing me the hell off, they decided when Austin Reeves was out there to put other bodies on him. Reed Shepherd and Josh Okogie. And he fed off that fairly well for his standard. It also gave the Lakers a 7-point lead heading into the second quarter. I am clamoring for them when Austin Reeves is out there. And yes, with Luke Kennard's ability to move around as an off-ball shooter, I can understand why they were doing it when he was the only one in the game. With Austin Reeves back now, I was saying over and over again, the best way for you to force him into mistakes is to put Amen Thompson on him as the primary assignment. That was your best way to guard him, is to place Amen Thompson on him. And for majority of these possessions, he just did not Udoka. And I'm like, brother, man, what the fuck are you thinking about? Just insanity to me that they didn't think to do this more often. Especially with how Austin Reeves began the game. But I digress. Man. Heading into the second quarter, though, the Rockets would start to turn it around as a team. And Dorian Finney-Smith getting some early revenge with a couple of three-point makes on his former team before he got traded at the trade deadline. And Reed Sheppard would also pull them ahead, being the only lethal three-point shooter consistently that Houston has to this point. They just kept it going as they continued to force LeBron into several errant turnovers, which carried over from Game 4 and how they played against him then. They were able to, over the course of this quarter, get themselves a 12-4 run in this time span. As for one, again, the Lakers were just held ineffective as shooters overall, especially from three-point range, which is typical for them, especially when they're open. And even with some of the other shots here that they did get up, if they weren't turning the ball over, no, they just had some very weird misses off the rim that just really stuck out. It's like, I know these players can make these shots, and even on occasion, like, these are ones that go in more often than not, and they just aren't. So that's a fair thing to be said. Of course, similar thing could be argued for Game 4. Still, you have got to push through it and make plays. And the Lakers were not able to enough, as they did do enough work to get back into it at around the 2-minute 26-second mark. They tied the ball game back up after all of that. Still, though, they got sloppy late as they allowed the Rockets to go on a bit of a brief run before ending the quarter on a 7-3 stretch to get to halftime with a 51-47 lead after Tari Eason made a three-pointer. And his mother was made proud in that instant. Also, goodness gracious. Hey man, this third quarter, the Rockets, through it all, they were able to retain control. Now, granted, there were some mismatches on both sides that were just completely mishandled. And yet still at times these teams could not do enough to actually hold on to the ball for long enough to make plays. Like on one occasion, you just have an outlet pass being thrown all the way down the court, and LeBron essentially has to sprint all the way out to try to grab it, and it just doesn't even come close to staying in bounds. And this is after a stop that they got at the time. Those kinds of things matter, especially as this was still like a 7-point ball game. Now, by that point, there would be a flagrant foul called on Tari Eason, which could have helped the Lakers to string multiple possessions together. That ended up faltering, and the Rockets were then able to push the lead up to 11 at that time, with Jabari Smith Jr. making a timely shot. The very second that Amen Thompson was placed on Austin Reeves, he ripped the shit out of him, and he ran down into the lane for an easy basket. The very second that happened. And I'm like, that is exactly what he can do against them. And yet they still decided, you know what, hey, we're just going to do away with that. We're going to have anybody else take their shot at guarding them. And it made no sense to me. I guess there is a method to the madness, because by this point the Rockets had a short 6-2 run. They were still winning the final 5 minutes in a way, which was important for them heading into this one, and they didn't have the lead. They were up 76-67 by the end of the third quarter, so they were still up. Now, I ended up watching the entire fourth quarter, of course. Did not necessarily note anything for it, but man, literally, like I'm looking in several different places here. On one end, it's like, oh my gosh, like one of these sequences from DeAndre Ayton was just incredibly ridiculous, man. Because, like, somebody said he had butterfingers. Dude, how the fuck do you get this pass with Tari Easton on you in the painted area? It's right in your hands, and not only does he struggle to field it in the first place, but he literally struggles to even get the proper shot up. When, if he was any bit stronger or more willing to just straight up dunk the ball, he'd be able to get it in over Easton pretty easily. And that led to just a very bad possession, which by this point, they are still trailing by around 10. And every single possession matters in the final quarter if you know that the Rockets are going to continue to swarm you and limit your ability to even remotely compete with them on the boards. You know you need to make these shots, and yet you're just wasting easy opportunities doing stupid shit. It's wild to me. In this time span as well, you also just see how resilient the Rockets are. You know, even with them facing this deficit on the verge of elimination, they were still able to completely control the flow of this game in the fourth quarter. Of course, the Lakers were not consistently able to get a shot off. When they did, though, because this became a clutch time game, once Rui Hachimura made this very much needed 3-point shot, it got there, and yet still, with as slow as these possessions were, they hustled. They got down to the brass tacks, and they played rock-solid defense. That Reed Shepard sequence here, with around 2 minutes left, where he not only proceeded to get in for an easy mid-range look for himself and create his own shot there, he ripped the ball into LeBron James' hands and drove down into the lane for a dunk. And forced a timeout as they went up by 7. I think that moment right there was really the backbreaker. And it just set the tone for how the rest of this quarter was going to go for LA. Like, believe me, they tried, and they did still have a little bit of a chance as this lead started to trim down. They still had to take so much time off just to even get efficient looks in. But DeAndre Ayton would eventually sky in on a sequence of multiple offensive rebounds and misses to then get in a dunk with 22 seconds left. So they had life. It wasn't completely over, but obviously When it came down to it, you were going to have to force a turnover at some point. And they failed to do that. And Amen Thompson did, in fact, miss one of his free throws. Unfortunately, again, a Lakers team who struggled to shoot throughout this quarter, even though they won it, weirdly enough, especially in the back half, they just could not get it done. They would miss another three-point shot as Jabari Smith Jr. would make another pair of free throws for them to win 99-93. Now you're sweating bullets a little bit if you are the Lakers. It's not like this Rockets team hasn't dealt with that in a way. This is a team who, as they mentioned, as I would know, they did come back from down 1-3 and trailing in last year's first round series against the Warriors to make that a 7-game series. Ultimately, they lost. They've shown multiple times now that even when they are down in a series, they can ultimately do what they need to do in order to give themselves a chance to win. My thing is with them that, hey, if you have the potential to do this, why aren't you executing this in the first half of the series? Why does it always have to be done late? Why has that been the trend for you over the past couple of seasons? Get that stuff knocked out. Give yourself early positioning in the first 3 games, and you don't have to always worry about it coming down to you having to play like it's the final game of your potential season, because it absolutely is if you take an alternative outcome and lose. There's just no need to inflict that kind of pressure on yourself. Still, they've won it in their way, and ironically enough, they did get out-rebounded in this game. They did get outscored in the paint. They were far more efficient, though, especially from three-point range. Even if they're right at league average at 35%, they made 7 more in a 6-point ball game and shot about 9% better than the Lakers did at just a 26% clip around. And they typically struggle to shoot, but they got that when it mattered the most and won the game, turning them over and creating easy opportunities at scoring for themselves. Still having more points off of turnovers than the Lakers as well in this equation. I'm not out here saying that they can do it, because an 0-3 comeback has never happened in NBA history. Things can potentially get dangerous if the Lakers do not find a way to win tonight. And it sets up perfectly for Houston now being back at home. I expect that crowd to be so into it and very hostile. Those are the kinds of atmospheres that you live for in a playoff setting, truly. In this game, Jabari Smith Jr. had 22 points, 7 rebounds, and 3 assists. Won 6 of 13 shooting with 4 threes. Tari Eason and even Amen Thompson somehow had 2 threes each, if you can believe that. And I'm like, oh, you could leave Amen Thompson. He's going to make another one, and he made another one, and it ended up being very important. Like that very much surprised me. I don't know how sustainable that is, but it did benefit the Rockets here. Alperen Sengun had 14 points, 9 rebounds, and 8 assists as well on 5 of 9 shooting. And Reed Shepherd added a pair of threes with 12 points also, and 6 assists with just a single turnover. As for the Lakers, LeBron had 25 points, 7 assists, and 3 rebounds on 9 of 20 shooting, and did not make a single three in this game. Austin Reeves as well had 22 points and 6 assists, along with 4 rebounds. but did not shoot the best. Had 12 free throws and shot 4 of 16 from the field by the end of this game. And again, some of the looks that he got are ones that I think that he would normally hit. He reflects poorly on the team when you're going to have multiple players struggle like this. I do think, though, honestly, that he can turn it around and probably has the best chance to do so out of most of the players who might have struggled in this game. You know, there is at least an excuse for him, considering how much time he's missed, and that being his first playoff action to this point. So I can understand why he'd come out and be a little bit ineffective. Still, his scoring provided enough of a punch for them to remain in the game for as long as possible. DeAndre Ayton had 18 points and 17 rebounds as well, on 9 of 14 shooting. Now, again, that's not a bad game on paper, but when you look at some of the lack of defensive effort, and just ineptitude, as well as whatever the hell might have been happening on a few of these offensive possessions, it's like, brother, you have got to step your shit up. I'm literally saying, because it's getting to a point where it's like, does this dude actually recognize that this is one of the last chances, if not the very last chance he's being given to turn into a quality center in this league? That's why you get the 2-year, $16 million deal in the offseason. Like, he started to come on strong over the last half of the year, but then to just constantly revert into whatever the hell that is, it's like, brother, come on. Please, you have to be a bit more consistent than that, especially if the Lakers ultimately want to come out with a win tonight. Rui Hachimura had 12 points and 4 rebounds, while Marcus Smart also had 11 points and 5 rebounds with 6 turnovers in this game. They did a great job, the Rockets, of bottling him up all game, even when, he was trying to establish some rhythm in the pick and roll. It just did not, they blew it up every time. I don't think as well that Luke Kennard will finish with a single point either, and he played in 31 minutes. I don't expect a repeat performance of that kind for him. The Lakers, they are going to have to, again, play a full 4 quarters for one, and 2, limit their turnovers in order to really win this game tonight. That's what it's going to take. And it's something that they have struggled with over the past 2. Now, again, they've given themselves that cushion, which the Rockets do deserve a lot of criticism for. At the same time, they've now worked themselves back into this being at least somewhat of a series, and they have a chance to secure it at home. So, compared to being a complete sweep out of the first round, could be very important to see what they do next as a team, as far as this game is concerned. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.